Kaimen Pukudan. Good morning. I thank you for the invitation. This is a very important opportunity to reaffirm the progress we have made within the UN, including the Yellow Convention 169 and the Convention on Biological Diversity and the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. There should never be regression in the individual and the collective rights hardly achieved of the indigenous peoples. I am the first indigenous person to be president FUNAI, and that is a historic achievement that have been important signal for improving indigenous policy in Brazil. The first one is the reactivation of the National Council of the Indigenous Policy as a space for indigenous peoples to deliberate on policies regarding their rights. Second, the restatement of the Steering Committee of the National Policy for Territorial and Environmental Management of Indigenous Land, PENEGAT, which seek to guarantee the protection and sustainable use of the resources in the indigenous land and territories, while promoting social, cultural, and autonomy and the well-being of the communities. Third, in the participation of indigenous leaders in high-level the government position. And the last, they have others, and the institutional improving of the National Foundation on Indigenous People, FUNAI, reinforcing its role on the defense and the promotion of indigenous rights, and progress in the demarcation of the indigenous lands in accord with the Federal National Constitution of 1988. 11 lands have been declared, and 16 demarcation homologated in past 2 years. And the action of dispelling the indigenous land affected by illegal mining with the removal thousands of the miners from the Yanomami indigenous lands. If we do not continue action, pressure may intensify, increasing of conflict and put indigenous people at risk, especially in isolated areas, front of economy expansion. Proposed for setback, treating territorial rights and consequently the lives of indigenous peoples. They represent a form of violence against indigenous and the forest, threat Brazil and the global climate commitments. The approval of the time frame law, marco temporal in Portuguese, with restrict demarcation to lands occupied in 1988, ignoring historical removed suffering by indigenous peoples in Brazil during the forced colonization. Bills that seek to allow mining and large enterprises in indigenous land without FPIC, in clear violation of the Constitution and the Yellow 169. Bills that seek to work environmental rules, increase deforestation, and undermines oversight agents. Many indigenous people already have their own consultation protocols to show the correct way to be heard by the government, company, or no indigenous third parties. However, given the ethnic, geographic, and linguistic diversity, many still do not have the protocol. This protocol serves as preventing mechanism to balance the inequality of the representation on decision-making space. Brazil currently recognizes 114 references of isolated indigenous peoples, 28 of them confirmed. Each illegal advice of the road, logging fronts, mining, or land gambits can mean the collapse in a entire people. Protection policy are not optional. They are the constitutional and humanitarian duty. For indigenous peoples, the relationship with the lands and the forests is separate. It is not only material, but spiritual, cultural, and intergenerational. The territory is sacred. Measures for the demarcation and protection of the land must be considered priority, not only for safeguarding indigenous rights, but also as a strategy for biodiversity conservation and addressing the climate crisis. Indigenous people are not merely guardians on the global climate, but right holders who must be part of the decision-making process, beneficiary of the fair and the equilibrated benefit sharing and including in the global policy. We are aware of the great challenge ahead, the growing global demands for high mineral or critical mineral for energy transition necessary for achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement. However, it's not management responsibility. This code target of exacerbated human rights violation and abuse, conflict, violence to community and the individual along the value chain. The IPCC recognized the indigenous technology is essential for climate mitigation and adaptation policy. Therefore, protection of indigenous land is also a means to implement climate policy based on scientific evidence. Indigenous peoples do not want to be merely providers of the raw material as happening in the past. The challenges is to have safeguards respected and implemented with the participation of indigenous people, especially through the land demarcation and the protection of their rights. Meaning, without safeguards, destroy lives, cultures, and compromise humanity' common future. The world recognizes the urgency of transition to sustainable energy system, but this transition cannot be repeat historical injustice. Indigenous people offer the pathway, community solar energy protection in remote areas, indigenous technology that inspired low impact and resilience solution, the leadership of indigenous women who preserve and transmit essential technical and spiritual knowledge for sustainability. These practices demonstrate that there is no just transitions without effective indigenous participation. Here is highlight for priority. Create binding policy that guarantees free, prior, and informed consent in all projects. Adopt new safeguard and accountability mechanism ensuring fair benefit sharing, assess the impact of energy transition, ensure rights and the value chain and the minor and renewable energy. Values positive partnership between indigenous peoples and renewable energy develops, and especially guarantees indigenous demarcation and protection for indigenous people. As President Lula emphasized at the 8th UN Generation Assembly yesterday, the race for critical minerals, essential for the energy transition, must not reproduce the predatory logic that marked the past century. Ladies and gentlemen, Kaimen Manawan.
Thank you.